Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Gerst. I've been hiring and mentoring executives, frontline employees, and job seekers for nearly 40 years through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions, big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big job change. We all know transitions can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have actionable strategies and proven tactics to achieve the future you want. We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to your next great job. So if change is on your horizon, you won't want to miss this discussion. Also, please subscribe to this podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. Welcome to this week's episode of People in Transition. I'm really excited about today's conversation because we have a fantastic guest joining us, Al Lichtenstein, the founder and principal of HR Results. Al is a seasoned human resources executive who has held senior leadership positions in companies within the professional services and life science industries. He's known not only for his strategic HR insight, but also for his hands-on approach. He doesn't just recommend solutions. He rolls up his sleeves and gets things done. Al has an impressive track record in leading HR departments that are customer-focused and responsive, always with an eye on organizational growth and development. His work spans everything from designing performance management processes that drive real results to developing talent acquisition programs and career development initiatives. Al's expertise goes even further as a career coach, where he leverages his own experiences to help others explore and define their professional paths. I can't wait to dive into today's discussion and hear more about Al's journey, his insights, and his advice. Good morning, Al.
Good morning, Bob. Good to hear from you.
Al, my listeners love my signature question, and that signature question is, what was it that when you were a child wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, there's probably a couple things. I think when I was truly a child, my goal was to be a professional baseball player, but I soon realized that at 5'9" and 150 pounds, there weren't too many other professional ball players of that small size. So probably a more realistic answer for you is that when I started college, based on advice from my father, the goal was to go into psych pre-med and wind up being a psychiatrist. However, based on taking chemistry freshman year, being a psychiatrist was quickly in the rearview mirror. And what I did was I kept the major of psychology because I truly enjoyed learning about human behavior and why people do things. And that ultimately pushed me in the direction of going into human resources.
And Al, describe to us transition moments that went through your life from seeing yourself as that baseball player / psychiatrist to where you're at today.
Well, it was quite a journey. When you graduate undergrad with a degree in psychology, I wasn't really marketable for maybe the jobs I wanted to have. And so I actually started out as a claims adjuster at an insurance company. I did that for about a year and while going for an MBA at night. I then learned that when I talked to the counselor where I was getting the MBA, that there was another college across town that offered a master's in human resources. At the time, it was called industrial relations. And so I went to get my master's degree there. And my first real HR job was working for a company that focused on unemployment insurance. and I had a lot of client contact. It gave me a chance to do things in a very customer-focused way and being highly responsive. But after 3 years of working in unemployment insurance, I realized that that's a small tip of any HR iceberg in terms of the responsibilities an HR person would have. And so I wound up responding to an ad in the newspaper for what turned out to be a scheduling position at a CPA and consulting firm. And you're very familiar with that because that's where we started working together. I stayed in with professional service organizations for about 12 years, ultimately heading up the HR function for a different CPA and consulting firm, and stayed with them until they went out of business. At that time, having, I thought, a marketable resume to continue in the profession I enjoyed, I was fortunate enough to land a position with a German-owned pharmaceutical company and stayed in the life sciences industry then for another 15, 20 years as an employee, heading up HR functions for 2 pharma companies and 1 biotech. And approximately 17 years ago, decided to go off on my own and exercise my entrepreneurial spirit and founded HR Results LLC.
Al, I want to set the stage here for our discussion. You and I have talked about this before, and I think that it's really important that we share thoughts on this because it impacts each of the areas that we're going to talk about today. And that is your concept of strategically approaching a job search. Can you describe to our listeners what that means and the impact that that strategic approach has on their job search?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for asking, Bob. It is very important to me to build on my own personal experiences where I had my own job search, which lasted 9 months about 20 years ago. And so when I work with my clients, I approach the job search process very strategically, starting out by having my clients take a few assessments and exercises to better prepare them to do a couple of things: to develop an impactful resume, to more effectively network, to answer difficult interview questions they may get, and to ask meaningful interview questions that will give them answers to help them make the right decision, and ultimately, if needed, to help them negotiate a job offer.
Can you talk to what those assessments might be, and how can I potentially, as a job seeker, take some of those, and what will it give to me?
There's 3 assessments that I tend to use. The first 2 are geared toward building an impactful resume. And the name of one of the assessments is Career Goals. And what I ask someone to provide information on is their skills and competencies is one area. What are some of the traits and characteristics of a company culture they're looking to work in that would be a good fit for them? What are some of the quality of life issues that they want to factor in? What is the extent of the responsibilities they want to have? Are they individual contributors? Are they looking to move into management, etc.? And so they have to think about those kind of things with the career goals exercise. The clones exercise is kind of a forward-thinking, no boundaries involved, where you clone yourself into 5 different occupations or positions. But the important thing is there's 2 questions you have to answer for each of the positions you select. One is, what skills do you have to perform that position? And 2, what motivated you to pick this position? And so at the end of having 5 clones, you then summarize what were all the skills you thought you needed to have to perform the 5 positions, and what were the 5 motivators for why you picked those positions. And as a result of taking those 2 assessments, we're in a better position to create a very impactful profile on the resume, building on functional skills, building on transferable skills, and also identifying what motivates them. what about their jobs are they passionate about? Because when I work with someone to put their profile together, I see this as a brief introduction of their background, their experience, what skill sets they bring. But importantly, I also learned by having a sentence in your profile that talks about what you're passionate about, it helps make a connection with the people reading your resume. So those are two of the assessments I use. The last one is called My Ideal Job. And basically, this is an Excel spreadsheet with 4 categories that you need to fill in criteria. One is things that cost the company money, salary, bonus, 401k match, etc. Quality of life issues, which, as you know, has become a bigger issue since the pandemic. Are you looking for remote work, hybrid work situation? How do you feel about out-of-town travel? How do you feel about how much overtime you do? So we need to collect some criteria there. Third category is called career development and/or how challenged do you want to be? And so the people fill in some criteria there. And the last category, arguably the most important, asks you to list the traits and characteristics of a manager that you might want to work with that would allow you to make a smooth transition and have a productive, harmonious relationship with them. And secondarily, what are the beliefs and values that you're looking for your next company to have? So that will be a good fit for you too, because when I meet with my clients and we review their criteria, I want to make sure that they've touched on each of the 5 main reasons why people tend to leave organizations. When they've completed the My Ideal Job exercise and it's prioritized, they prioritize up to 25 criteria, but in my mind, the most important are the top 10, because those are the ones that they want to understand about the companies they're interviewing with, how good a fit it'll be. And also, by doing this exercise, they've probably already answered a number of the key questions that they're going to get during the interview process.
And I would imagine that the answers to these questions is going to help in the resume preparation that a candidate goes through. What else do you look for, Al, in that effective resume preparation that will help the candidate stand out?
I think there's a number of things that I look for based on seeing resumes that I kind of cringe when I look at it. I think especially for people who've got anywhere from 3 or more years of experience, I look for a resume that starts out with headline news. And so whether you're an accounts payable person, and that's your headline, or you're an HR executive, there should be a heading on your resume right under your contact information at the very top. And then I also recommend under the headline news that you list, and this is all in bold print, what are your top 3 areas of strength, and whether it's a functional technical skill and/or, in my mind, at most jobs, you need to have communication skills, relationship building skills, depending on where you're at in your career. Are you good at strategic thinking, problem solving? But you have up to 3 of your top skills listed under your headline news. And then in your profile, it's a brief overview. You might talk about areas that you specialize or excel in. And then I usually ask my clients to list at least 6 areas of strength that are bulleted items under this brief profile. So that's the first thing I look for when I'm working with a client. The next thing, in what we would call the professional experience section, I think it's critical that people realize that we're not looking for them to cut and paste their job description under each position they've been in. And I strongly encourage the people I work with to think about accomplishments, to think about things they did where they excelled, where they were recognized. And so I push my clients to either have quantifiable accomplishments or at least write the accomplishment in such a way that says resulting in what. so that you might say, I implemented this system and process, which resulted in reduced time to get more meaningful information. The other thing that I find with a lot of people, because they don't know where to put it, but if they've ever been recognized on the job with different awards, special recognition awards, or salespeople get rewards, you don't bury it at the bottom of the last page of your resume. At a minimum, you put it as one of your accomplishments in the position you were recognized in. And going back to the profile, I'm very big on, if you have been recognized and all, that maybe your profile starts out with the words accomplished and award winning, because I'd like to think that all of us, after a number of years of work, have accomplished things. We're not just experienced. In my mind, that's years of work, but you've accomplished things at the jobs you've been at. And if you've been recognized, what better place to put that you were award winning than in your profile? Because to me, any recruiter worth their salt is going to ask you what awards you won for doing what. So it becomes a very easy interview question to be posed to you. The other thing that I think people need to be mindful of, depending on how long you've been in the workforce, is you don't have to list every single job you've ever had. A term that's come about in the last number of years is ageism. And so I'm big on making sure my clients don't put more than 15 tops 20 years of work experience. And if there are companies they worked with before that is worth mentioning the names of the companies, I might suggest a section that says additional professional experience and just list the company name and your title there, but not list the years you worked there. So those are some of the things that come to my mind that I work with my clients, so that the resume comes across impactfully and it highlights accomplishments and achievements and things that they did that were noteworthy, not just stating responsibilities.
Al, the age-old question, cover letters, do you support using them or not? And if you do, how is the cover letter somehow different than the resume or anything else that you're publishing?
I am an advocate of the cover letter because I view it as a necessary evil. I know that most applicant tracking systems don't download the cover letter. They probably just download the resume. But I think the cover letter does give the applicant an opportunity to introduce themselves, to explain any key things that they might. For instance, I'm working someone right now who had 2 jobs out of college. Both went about a year and a half, and in both cases, he was a victim of a layoff for business reasons, not performance reasons. And so the cover letter might give him an opportunity to explain that in the cover letter, as opposed to his resume automatically going in the no pile. I also view the cover letter as an opportunity, maybe in the second paragraph of the cover letter, to provide some accomplishments that might already be on the resume, but some accomplishments that they've had that align with the job posting as something that can catch the reader's eye. And lastly, in the last paragraph, I'm big on not saying I look forward to hearing from you, but saying when is a good time for me to contact you, because we're taking a more assertive approach in our job search, not we're waiting around for people to call us.
Al, other than describing the potential reasons why the job transition, do you advocate at all putting any personal information in that cover letter, or stay away from that?
I tend to stay away from personal information and just keep it professional and related to the job that you're seeking. So I'm not going to advocate saying I'm a mother of 3 or I have a disability or whatever. Let that come out if and when it's appropriate during an interview.
Al, let's go back to that strategic thinking and let's link it to networking. Can you describe what strategic approach to networking is and how do I implement that?
In my mind, networking is the name of the game in the job search process. And in fact, to quote the former or current CEO at Korn Ferry, which, as you know, is a big name executive search firm. The CEO there felt that the resume was only 10% of the job search process. So that to me, it's all about networking. When I coach my clients, I quickly point out that as you call people, if you're going to call them and ask, are you aware of any jobs I might be a good fit for? 98% of the time, the answer is no, because people aren't aware of jobs. And in certain economies that things are slow and there are layoffs, you're going to have a lot of short conversations that you haven't built any rapport to have follow-up calls and contact with that networking person. And so what I coach my clients to do is call and start out with people you know already, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's former colleagues from where you work, but people that you're comfortable talking to that know you already. And you start out after the small talk about news, weather, and sports, you start out with, I'd really appreciate any suggestions, advice, or recommendations you might have for me regarding my job search. That way, it's an open-ended question. Most people have either been out of work or know someone who's been out of work, and so they can give advice. And at worst, they can say, send me a copy of your resume, and I'll let you know what I think. The next question would be, are there any people that you think would be good for me to reach out to add to my network that would be good contacts? And assuming everybody knows somebody, ideally, a perfect networking call will get you 2 or 3 more contacts because you're probably not going to hear about any job openings. Assuming the person has contacts for you, you ask if it's okay to use your name when I reach out to them. And then I recommend to say that if you're reaching out in an email, the subject line should say, for instance, Bob, if you referred some contacts to me, my email to those contacts would be, Bob Gerst recommended I contact you. So we've connected while they're getting an email from someone they never heard of before and are more prone to respond to that email. Because this isn't a one-way relationship, at that point in time, I would coach my client to say, is there anything I can do for you? And you never know what might come out of that question. Sometimes it's nothing, but I did have a situation once personally where another career coach I knew was having group meetings a couple times a month at a local church or at a local community center. And the community center did not have a ramp for people with disabilities. And so her comment to me is, if you know anybody who has a connection to a facility with a ramp for the disabled, that would be great. And in talking to other clients that I had, it turned out someone was willing to offer the church they went to for this person to have her group meetings for the group she was working with. The last thing that I ask my clients to make sure, after you've had a meaningful conversation, or you maybe got more contacts, or the person said, send me your resume, you ask, is it okay if I keep you posted on my job search progress? And that way, instead of asking only, are you aware of a job, ideally you've made a connection, gotten help from this person, you've offered your help if there's anything they need, but ideally you now have someone that you can email or call or network with going forward, as opposed to a lot of one and done conversations.
Al, what about interview preparation? What do you coach your clients regarding the different kinds of interviews that are going on? Some of them are on the phone, some of them are on Zoom, some of them are in person. So how do you prepare for that? And what are some of the key things that you tell your clients as they, again, try to stand out in those interviews?
Well, again, since the pandemic, there's the old standard first interview as a phone call has gone by the way of virtual meetings, as you know. Maybe I'm old school, but my advice to my clients is you dress professionally for these interviews, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person. And I'm someone who recommends a suit and tie or a sport coat and tie because I've been disappointed in how many candidates I've interviewed as a contract HR person who kind of took the fact that it was a virtual interview as an excuse to be very casual for the interview, and it creates an impression. And to me, it created a less than positive impression to the extent that I literally complimented a few people who showed up for a virtual interview with at least a tie or a jacket on. So that's the first thing I would tell them to be aware of. Also, with virtual interviews, make sure you're in a quiet room. Make sure you don't have background noise or pets barging in and wanting to bark to get your attention. And the other thing with virtual interviews, it's important to realize the lighting in the room, because you want the lighting coming from behind your computer screen, because otherwise you're going to have a shadowing effect and you're not going to come through as clearly. But that's more the cosmetic aspect of the interviewing. In terms of preparing to give meaningful answers and all, we go through practice interviews from the old "tell me about yourself," which I translate to my clients as "tell me about yourself" really means walk me through the evolution of your career, focusing on key skills or competencies you develop, and tell me the reason why you left company A to go to company B. So prepare for that kind of question for the "tell me about yourself." We also make sure that interviewee is prepared for questions like, what are your strengths and what are your opportunities for improvement? And recognizing that your opportunity for improvement could have been something that you were told about in the past that you subsequently improved already, as opposed to it being a current opportunity for improvement. The interviewer might also ask about an accomplishment you're most proud of and why. And I would suggest my clients be prepared for those kind of things. And then there are more situational things that I think they need to be mindful of. Tell me about a time you felt strongly about a recommendation you made that was not accepted. Tell me about a time that things were not going your way and what did you do to correct it? Tell me about a time you made a mistake on the job. What lesson did you learn from it? Because we're all human and all these things happened. And so let's show them, I made this mistake 7 years ago and I've never made it again because I've added a few steps in the process to make sure I'm checking my work. The other thing, in many states now, you cannot ask about salary history. So I talk to my clients about being prepared to answer a question, what are your salary expectations? And how do you want to answer that based on continuing in the interview process and being able to negotiate the same or a better salary depending on what's important to you. So those are a few areas that we tend to tackle. And with some of my clients, we might have at least 2 sessions of practicing these kind of tough interview questions, as well as any questions they might have gotten or had in the past that they found difficult and wanted my advice on how to handle them should those questions come up going forward.
Al, as we get to the end of our time here today, I'm always curious in terms of, are there any books or other resources that you would recommend to someone if they're going through their own personal job transition?
Well, actually there are. And Bob, as you and I spoke, I worked with a fellow named Tom Morris as part of an outplacement coach for about 8-9 years. And Tom was an author and wrote a number of books. One in particular is called Career Mechanics 1, Solutions to Common Career and Employment Issues. And within his book, he touches base on recruiting and retention, career assessments, resumes, networking, interviewing, etc. And I think that this is a good book. It's not lengthy. It's an easy read, but it gives someone good insights and a good background if they're going through being out of work for the first time or first or second time.
Al, we've gone through so much great information here this morning. If our listeners only remember 3 things to help them find their next great job easier and faster, what are the 3 things you want them to take away?
Well, first and foremost is leverage your network and keep on networking. just as an aside, before I get to numbers 2 and 3, realize that some 85% of companies have employee referral programs. And so they'd rather pay an employee a couple $1,000s to hire you than pay an agency 20 or 25%. So leverage that network because it's going to pay out benefits. Stay visible within your network. Follow up with the people that you've talked to earlier in the process. And I know when my job search moved into a 5th and 6th month, the advice I got was send out a monthly newsletter to everybody in your network. Let them know you're still actively interviewing. Let them know that you've been to every Starbucks from Virginia to Maryland, but stay visible. And then the last thing, because a job search can be a real emotional roller coaster, do your best to keep a positive attitude and keep up your confidence.
Al, I knew when we reconnected that this would be a great interview with so much helpful information that someone can take next week and implement and assist them in their job search. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for sharing your insights, and I want to thank you for reconnecting with me. Good to talk with you, my friend.
Thanks so much, Bob. It's been great.
Thank you for listening. We're working in unprecedented times. The purpose of these episodes is to give you the support and critical tools to adjust with the changing marketplace. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully survived their own obstacle course and can share useful information. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on your social media. Your review and rating helps get this to more people. Also, if you have questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode.